questions, I'll give kind of an update on the process so far.
I'm Leah Wills. I'm the Uplands and Forest Management Workgroup Coordinator, and I'm here to facilitate the meeting and help the workgroup accomplish their tasks.
Hi, Jonathan Cusel, Sierra Institute for Community and Environment over in Taylorsville.
Nancy Francine, I'm the Ecosystem Staff Officer on the Uplands National Forest, which means I have the oversight for timber, watershed, hydrology, wildlife, fish, rare plants, tropical weeds, heritage resources, and the province ecology program. So basically, the ologists
All came to you.
on the forest. And a lot of you know Terry Simon Jackson. She's moved on to become the deputy forest supervisor on the Shasta Trinity, and that position is not being filled due to declining budgets and lack of resources. So now I'm also have responsibility for the EPA and environmental planning, Department of Planning.
Nancy also has to supervise me, which is probably a larger challenge. Good morning, I'm Ryan Tompkins. I'm the Forest Silviculturist for the Plants.
My name is Ben Letton. I work for Central Valley Regional Water Board out of the Reading office, and I work in our forest activities program.
My name is Zeke Lunder. I'm with Deer Creek Resources in Chico. We're contracted with the Irwin project to provide GIS support and do some collaborative mapping. So we have different thematic maps here that we'd like to get people to draw project ideas and priorities onto during this workgroup process.
I'm David Pop. I'm here because I'm interested in forests and anxious to see how our money gets spent and what the logic is behind it.
I'm Oma Hedman. I'm a consultant who's been contracted by Columbus County to coordinate the overall IRW plan update.
Sue McCord, Plumas County Office of Emergency Services, Wildlife Fire Protection Specialist.
Hello, I'm Brooklyn Bowman. I'm a hydrogeologist. I live in East Plumas County. And we're very excited to work on this.
I'm Carl Feltz. I'm the current chair of the Lake Almanor Watershed Group, and I'm also the chair of the Floodplains, Metals, and Water Bodies Group for this.
I'm Brian McKillop, forester with Soper Wheeler Company for about 20 years. I'm the inventory GIS guy, I guess. This is the first meeting we've been to as representing Soper Wheeler, so I'm just here to kind of see what's going on and how we might be able to help. So.
I'm Mike Elso, University of California Cooperative Extension Natural Resources Advisor, serving Plumas and Sierra counties.
I'm John Sheehan. I'm currently an oak hunter-gatherer.
I'm Jay Francis. I'm the forest manager for Collins Pine Company up in Chester. We have about 94,000 acres, about half of that which is in the upper of the river watershed.
I'm Terry Rust. I'm the coordinator for the Meadows, Floodplains, and Water Bodies Work Group for the IRWM process. And our next meeting will be February 13th at the Quincy Library. I think a lot of you are already on the email list, but.
So I'm Dan Martin. I'm with the NRCS, Plumas and Sierra County.
All right. Well, sort of a way as a background, what we're doing is we're updating the 2005 Integrated Regional Water Management Plan for the Upper Feather River drainage basin. There's a map on the wall with a blue line that shows the boundaries. It crosses over several counties. Plumas, Lassen, Sierra, Yuba, Butte, and I think a little bit of Tehama County. Basically, it's the water supply for the California Water Project. It goes all the way down to the dam at Oroville. Going from there, I always say people remember that we are playing with the water supply of the California Water Project. Back when Brian Morris was the flood control district manager, I think the first item on the agenda here is a memorandum of understanding. Brian did a memorandum of understanding way back when, before we applied for the grant to do this process. That old plan is under Prop 50 standards. What we're doing today is under Prop 84 standards. There's kind of a new set of standards that the plan has to meet. So as a result, one of the first items you'll see in the packet is a draft stakeholder, or there's an MOU in here. I think there's an MOU in there. There should be. What happened is I took the MOU that Brian Morris produced, that a lot of people signed, and I modified it to sort of meet the decision-making process that we're working with in this project. The Regional Water Management Group met yesterday in this room. That group consists of members of RCDs, Board of Supervisors, somebody from the Sierra Valley Groundwater Management District, Native American representative, and there's also an at-large member from the Eleanor area, so that we covered as much as we could. I also have the task of redoing the MOU for the forest, which I have not done. It's a very simple MOU. Alice Carlton was the forest supervisor for the Plumas who signed that MOU. The Lassen, the Plumas, and the Tahoe are not voting members of the working or the management group, which is basically the steering committee, the decision-making body for the plan, but they are advisory to that group. Yesterday, Quentin Youngblood from the Tahoe was at the meeting and provided a lot of good input to that meeting yesterday. And then they all ran off for a grazing meeting in Sacramento, which is one of the other things that are going on. So we're basically, what we have is 4 working groups. This is one of them. There's an ag, meadows, a municipal, which is a new element to the plan, basically looking at infrastructure issues surrounding water. And then we have this forest working group. Is there anything else anybody can think of that I should say at this point as an introduction? Does anybody have any questions of me about anything I just said?
The leadership group, if you wanted to know who's the decision-making body for this whole program, it's Sharon Thrall. She's a Plumas County supervisor, and she is the chair. Paul Rowan is a Sierra County supervisor. He's the vice chair. Terry Swafford is another supervisor from Plumas County. Russell Reed is representing the Feather River Resource Conservation District. Bill Nunes is representing the Sierra Valley Resource Conservation District. Jim Roberti is representing the Sierra Groundwater Management District. Tom Yeagerhofer is representing Plumas County Community Development Commission for disadvantaged communities and their needs. Trina Cunningham is representing tribal groups. Jeffrey Greening is a public member, and then Joe Hoffman, Carol Thornton, and Quentin Youngblood are representing the Forest Service, if you recognize any of those names.
So part of this process will be for you guys to look at the MOU, and we encourage you to sign on. It's sort of a non-binding MOU. It doesn't do anything other than say you'll basically play with the process and participate. So it's in the packet. I'm not going to go over it, but it is in your packet, and please look at it. And whoever you're representing, Timber or other organizations, please consider signing on to the MOU.
Okay, so today we're going to be going through the IRWM, which is the Integrated Water Management Planning Update Process, and it has a number of elements, but the work groups are going to be working with that leadership group, management group that I just told you about, to provide on-the-ground input throughout this plan. So it's not just some canned plan that Luma, who's a very capable consultant, will probably do without any of us, but we're here to make it a plan that really fits for our region. So in that regard, we're going to be looking, our big task today will be looking at these things that are in the California Water Plan, which we have to keep addressing and making more local. Forest management showed up in the California Water Plan for the first time in 2013. So there's a lot of work we can do to fill that out for ourselves in the state of California. But the California Water Plan talks about these resource management strategies, and our task today is to look through those strategies and figure out which ones we as the work group are going to be primarily responsible for and which ones we might be overlapping with the other work groups on. So that will be our major task. And we started this planning process actually in 2005 when we adopted our first IRWM plan that was done under Prop 50 standards. And then we went through a process to have DWR accept that this was our planning region. And that was a rather involved process that Brian Morris, who some of you might know, helped lead us through. And we were granted that regional process acceptance in 2009. In 2012, we applied for a Proposition 84 planning grant to update our plan. It took us a couple of years to get under agreement with Department of Water Resources. And actually, the Regional Water Management Group really got going in September. So the Regional Water Management Group is on their third meeting, but this is the first meeting of this work group. We're last. The other work groups have had a first meeting already, but we will catch up. And here's the purpose of the plan well, here you can read it, to prioritize management strategies that are local for us and relevant for us, to identify challenges and opportunities, prioritize lists of projects that we can pursue funding for, and develop a plan that DWR accepts so that we're eligible for new sources of funding like the new water bond that was just passed.
So, if I may at this point, this is not a regulatory plan like a general plan that I just finished doing a year or so ago. It's not a plan like that at all. If anything, it's a plan that will develop projects in part and provide assistance in developing projects to ultimately be funded by some source. Maybe the recent proposition, maybe if the county ever gets any more of the Monterey funds or any other kind of funding source that may be out there. So there's some elements of the plan where you're looking at projects that basically what I call problem solving that will set up the ability to be competitive in a grant situation. And as Dan Martin pointed out in the work group meeting with the ag people last year, having a project identified in the plan will certainly add some weight to the possibility of those projects being funded. So there's a project development element of all this, as well as developing goals, objectives, and all the things that you normally put in a plan, but a lot of it is about projects. John?
Hey, since 70% of the county is federal, I'm wondering if there's been a corollary MOUs developed with Department of Water Resources and the State Water Resource Control Board to show the same gravitas for project proposal on national forest lands as we're attempting to do here on private lands.
To date, there isn't that kind of MOU, although we do have Ben in the room from the water board who's got the packet and all the information. I'm sure you're going to take some of this back and discuss it. But no, there hasn't been.
No, we have used Prop 50 funds on foresters land. You know, that we had a $2 million project for road rehab on that land. So, you know, we expect to be able to apply on all lands for competitive projects.
Who is the DWR rep for this region?
The person I work with is Debbie Spangler, and Mary Randall is her supervisor out of Red Bluff. I just talked to Debbie about a half hour ago. I guess when we worked on the Prop 50 grant with her. She is the primary contact for us on both the Prop 50 grant, which is still ongoing, And again, it does contain quite a bit of money that went to the forest just for road improvements. And she's the contact on the property before. So it's a little different process than before. The result will be projects and looking at funding opportunities.
And we're quite pleased that the new bond passed, because it has money set aside for this process, IRWM, but there's also money for things that work groups will be interested in, such as in-stream flow enhancement, watershed enhancements, and there's $2.7 billion for storage. And the word groundwater is in storage. They have those two projects, but they also have groundwater. So anticipating that we want to dig into that source of funds and compete with those two dams, we are starting a water balances study, and Burkhard will be leading the analysis on that water balance study, so I'm glad he's here, so you can meet him today. But this work group will be the advisory body for that study. And jumping ahead to what we're doing next, at the next meeting, is we will be bringing you the white paper that starts laying out what the infiltration potential is, with a 40% or more canopy removal with different kind of forest types, to start getting into the logic of how forests can be competitive for groundwater storage funding and provide, we feel, more environmental benefits and broader benefits than the two dams that are on the table that we will be competing against. So that's jumping ahead, but just to let you know that this thing is not just a planning process. We hope to have projects, we hope to get somewhere, actions, and change things on the ground in ways that people want to do that in this watershed. So you can read the mission statement. The regional management group wanted to be really clear that we wanted to have something that reflected local priorities, but also meets the DWR guidelines that we have to follow that were set by the legislature. And we have a process that's pretty well set up by the guidelines in the planning process, the Project Mission 84 guidelines, that walks through how we're supposed to accomplish these planning tasks. And Randy went through the MOU, so I won't dwell on that. And then the other document in your packet that you can read through on some night that you can't go to sleep is the stakeholder involvement plan. And it talks about how we're going to interact as we go through this planning process, and how we're going to make decisions, communicate, keep engaging with the public. And a key part of that planning process will be the website, and we'll scroll down and look at that in a minute. But I invite you to look at the stakeholder involvement plan when you have a chance. That's really our guide map for how we're going to do this. And the stakeholder involvement plan does talk about the 4 work groups. And we really have another work group, which is a tribal advisory committee. They're more of a body that is not going to have such a rigid structure as these work groups, but we were very interested in hearing tribal perspectives on forest management and water and all the other issues that we'll be addressing in this plan. And so there's really almost 5 work groups really, but agricultural, uplands, floodplain, municipal services.
One of the things I want to jump into is we purposely structured the grant agreement with DWR in this process in hopes of doing early identification and qualification for projects. So the actual plan kind of comes at the end, so we're not developing the plan right up front. It's really in the second year that the actual plan will be developed. We did that working in conjunction with Debbie Spangler and DWR, just on the off chance that if we've developed the goals, objectives, and projects and prioritize those projects, that we might be able to get funding for the last round of Prop 84. Now that kind of got waylaid a little bit with the drought declaration last year by the governor and the acceleration of the Prop 84 funding that resulted from that. kind of expecting the governor to say something real soon about this winter's precipitation. But just so you know, so we're not, it's kind of backwards in a way. I think Holly Foster picked up on it at the last workroom. I'm going, this is kind of backwards, but the reason was, and DWR agreed with it, that we do have the potential, maybe, because if we get far enough along to be able to apply for some funding, even if the plan itself is not completed, which has basically a 2-year time frame set through the grant.
And we're action-oriented, and we want to see what projects people are thinking about, how they fit together, and people think in terms of what needs to be done on the ground. So we really wanted to emphasize that. And so it's going to be a back and forth, the plan and the project development process, but we're hoping that that will be clearer as we move along. Now, this is an example of what the Floodplains, Meadows, and Water Bodies Work Group is going to be focusing on. But we're, of course, the Forest Work Group, and I had this nice little one-pager that now I can't find that said what we were focusing on. But it's basically what the meeting notice said is water pollution prevention, watershed management, forest water interactions, forest ecosystem restoration, upland recharge, flood risk reduction through wildfire risk reduction, precipitation enhancement through better groundwater infiltration and less evapotranspiration through forest stand density reduction. So that's sort of our overview of the kind of areas that we're going to be focusing on, but it will develop in the direction that the work group wants it to develop. So our task as work groups, all of 5 work groups, is to help the Regional Water Management Group, which is the leadership group or the decision-making body, focus on the resource management strategies and topics that are most important to our work group, to provide input on project selection and prioritization, comment on draft plan chapters, and invite presentations by technical experts, scientists, and others at work group meetings. Another handout on the back table is that because we're a little behind, we missed the call for studies, but in order for UMA to start doing the regional description of this area, we really need you to provide us with technical studies or area studies that you think are relevant to this region and the kind of water management challenges and resource challenges that we'll be facing, so she can do a good job of describing this region. And so I gave you a handout with an example of a study. It's a study that's recent that Burkhardt will be delving into and we'll be digging in further, that talks about this kind of broad brush study that says as you shift from snow to rain, they're seeing all over the West and all over many countries a shift and a reduced runoff in streams, which is a profound conclusion if other people start buying into it. Dr. Gary Freeman from PG&E has been saying that about this watershed for a long time. But it's the first study we were able to find, and thank Brian helped me dig it out, that really collaborates that kind of thinking from a much broader research base. And so that's the kind of stuff we're looking at, that you know things are happening on the ground, you're seeing things. What research have you been able to find that sort of ties into your on-the-ground knowledge, and how do we get that in this plan? So the call for studies is out right now, and we look forward to anything that you can help us with in that regard.
Just to add, that we'll be working on the regional description over the next couple of months, so the sooner you can get us those documents and studies, the better.
Yeah, Uma's starting to feel a little pressure.
So who do we get those to? What's the contact information?
The coordinators.
Me, and also we'll dig into the website. There's lots of ways, but yes, I'd be very happy to help collect those and talk to you about the studies.
How far back do you want to go with this?
What? The hall has seen a decline.
Well, John, I'm going to give you a couple of days ago, I pulled a book out of my bookcase, and there was a study beneath it. It was a 1960 study done by DWR, identifying, and they did a very extensive coring dam sites in 1960. I've got to figure a way to get it scanned so we can put it on the web. A very interesting study, because it actually they did some analysis of the groundwater basins. And the depth of the groundwater basins is sort of the makeup of it. And we know that we have the Sierra Valley groundwater basin, but all the other ones seem to got caught in it. And they actually did some coring and drilling. So that's a 60s study. I think it's relevant today for some background information.
Groundwater legislation.
They would have built a dam at Genesee, confluence of Nelson Creek in the Middle Fork. Red Clover Valley had one. Meadow Valley would not exist today except for a dam. So relevant studies that provide.
Well, I'm familiar with that one. That's a really important one to have in there to see what the state's designs were at that point.
Yeah.
But when you get into the forest, it becomes a different animal, and you get federal officials interacting with what they see from 1905 and the like. And is that, do we want to see the whole thing, or are we just going to limit it to the last couple decades?
No, I mean, one of the exciting things about, to me, doing the forest work right now is there's been so much research on the Forest Service side talking about what the forest looked like, in the pre-contact with the tribes. Always have something to say about that word. But anyway, that era and what is the value of looking at those kinds of studies and where are we headed and why and all that sort of thing. Never mind that the whole climate might be changing as well. But yeah, I think we have I sent Zeke a pile of baseline studies so far that are more general for the watershed and the whole region than our watershed. So I think we're going to compile them, and as the work group does its work, some things will come out as important, or we'll find new information needs that we want that turn into projects. So that's kind of how we view it. So we'll have a common basis that we can access on the web, and we'll start going from there.
John, as a planner and actually a social scientist too, I would hate to put a cap on knowledge, saying this date's not relevant anymore. So relevant information and studies is always welcome.
And the other thing we're really going to be struggling with is that, on this water balances study, we know that foresters are really used to looking at things like tree rings. So, and a lot of trend analysis is done through that. So how can we tie the kind of thinking we're doing on changing that infiltration to how it might show up in tree rings? So those are things as we go through this, how are we going to show that what we're trying to accomplish here is actually showing up in a way that matters to the forest management community? So, and none of that, because it's such a new area of the California Water Plan, a lot of this hasn't been compiled by anybody. So we're kind of on our own.
Yeah, I've got a question. I'm a little confused. The idea is to manage water. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, this is a water management plan, but because water just doesn't fall into your mouth or doesn't create, it goes through the land, and right. Somehow, management of the land affects the water.
Right. I'm just thinking, are we talking short term? Because if you read some of the studies, like I can't think of the lady's name, but droughts come and they can be very, very long. Right. And if you go back, I'm familiar with a guy named Axelrod wrote the history of flora, and it's how it's changed. We're talking maybe over thousands of years before the Ice Age. If we're going to a pattern like that, are we thinking long term, or are we just thinking short term management?
Well, one of the things we have to address is the whole climate change. Right. We're going to have a workshop. We're going to have to talk about adapting to something in a way that we can manage for it. There could be events that are so extreme we can't manage for it. But the trends we're seeing now, like the shift to rain and longer, drier, summer seasons, increase in wildfire, are things that the forest management community is trying to struggle with and adapt to so that we have healthy forests even as that changes.
We do have a climate change element to the plan, and there's 2 sub-consultants under UMA, Pacific Municipal Consulting and E Corp are going to do that section of the plan. They're going to do a workshop potentially in August. We had a phone conversation. I want to draw your attention to this handout that has this graph on here, and something that really struck me is that the bottom graph has some orange lines and all the other lines, and the orange lines are identifying a very dry year. And what struck me is after that very dry year, there was sort of a wet year. And especially the one in 76, 77. And what we're experiencing this year could end up to be another very, very dry year. That's sort of a pattern change that I'm seeing here in this graph. That one of the reasons we have it is I found this graph and I went, whoa, look at this. So something's different, I think, a little bit. Now, we could still catch up and have our miracle March, but this graph's kind of telling when you see that it's orange lines and go, where are we sitting here almost the 1st of February? January, I think, is the driest January on record in some places in California. So we're trying to bring in all kinds of information and including the climate change aspect.
Did that answer your question enough for now?
Can I just mention two things? That the planning horizon for this plan is about 20 years. And then, so it is taking a long-term look and then some short-term steps as well. And then also, to follow up on the call for science and papers, Zeke is our data management team member, and he will be putting together a map-based database, like a library of all the studies that are called in. I don't know if you want to talk about that a little bit, Zeke.
Good, when we talk about the website.
Okay. Right.
I have one comment question.
Sure.
Just to give that perspective. If some study came up and said, our forests have too much white fir and they suck a lot of water out, would be a plan to go remove 30% of the white firs to help the water percolate down? Is that a possibility? I'm just looking.
It would, yeah, it's something we would definitely discuss in the work group and think about how if people agreed that's something that should be piloted, how would you do it? Where would you do it?
Okay.
How would you track
Develop
it?
a project in accordance to do it. Yes. One of the things that I'm keying off that planning horizon, the sort of the decision-making process that was put together on this, with the makeup of that, the regional water management group, the decision maker, it is quite possible that even after this plan is done, that they may still keep themselves together as a sort of an overall organization looking at water issues into the future. Their purpose right now is to develop this plan, but given the makeup of it, it's quite possible they could decide to continue it into the future on their own initiative. That'll be up to them to decide when that comes about. But it is designed for that kind of ongoing oversight, management, however you want to call it, for the watershed.
So projects really get done. Didn't just do a plan that sits on the shelf and nothing came of it. That's what we don't. So, wait, should I?
And it is a complex problem to try to address.
So over 2 years, we're going to have 4 work group meetings per year, and we're going to have 1 integration workshop per year. The first one will be projects. The work groups are going to be putting forward their projects, but then there's going to be 1 meeting where all the work groups get together and say, did any of these projects fit together? So that's 1 integration workshop. The next one will be about the plan chapters. Are we missing something as we get each of these pieces that needs to be more integrated as we do the plan? And then there's going to be 2 public hearings where we solicit projects from the public, and then there's 2 draft plan hearings where we go out to the public and solicit comments. But otherwise, most of the work is going to be coming through the work groups and also at the public comment period or agenda items on the regional water management group. So that's how this thing will build over the next 2 years.
I have a question. Is there any plans to meet with adjacent regions that have similar types of work groups? Because I know that's been one point of the DWR's kind of struggled with is sort of lack of communication and integration with adjacent regions. When you're dealing with like forest-related issues, obviously those things go beyond just this regional boundary.
We have something where we're supposed to,
Do an interregional out.
talk to the other regions. Now, they're way ahead in their planning process. We're one of the last plans. So they're kind of done with that, but I'm sure as we get into bigger things like for example, going after the storage money in the bond, that's gonna be a region, the forest regions are gonna have to talk about how to do that and how to muscle our way in there. And so and Mercury's another issue where it crosses a lot of regions. The tribes have issues that cross a lot of regions. So I think a lot of it will be issue-based as much, and we have obligations to talk to folks like the state water contractors and PG&E and utilities and things that are kind of embedded in our work plan. But we haven't come to that point. We're waiting for the issues to come up for the work groups, and then, we will talk about, especially when it comes to getting that bond money, how it is that we need to get to a critical scale to make an impact there with the California Water Commission, the governor, and all those other folks.
So, Uma, you're going to a meeting next Friday. I'm debating whether to go in Auburn, and that's the mountain counties.
They're doing a whole presentation on the water bond and where is everything going, and so that's more of a Central Sierra group, and then there's a Sierra Water Work Group that goes across the whole Sierra. So there's these inter-regional groups that are already up and running, and I'm sure as it gets closer to how these bond funds are going to roll out, there's going to be a lot more interest in how the regions can cooperate and get something besides Public Works in LA funded.
Yeah, I just asked because this is the fourth IRWM group that I've participated in, and I think that for these rural regions, there's some low-hanging fruit projects, water infrastructure, water treatment, those types of things. They are absolutely great projects and need to get done. When those have been funded, hopefully, then I think it becomes a little more difficult for some of these, upper watershed regions to be competitive for funds because the issues become a little bit more ubiquitous,
And it's obscure.
So it's really, I think, important that the regions start coordinating with those adjacent, groups so that you can, kind of together, build sort of a critical, momentum for some of those.
And Jonathan, maybe you can say something. Sierra Conservancy is talking about kind of a region-wide program, aren't they?
Discussion yesterday about launching what they're calling a WIP, a watershed improvement plan that takes off of the Tahoe project, the EIP project that was launched there. The notion behind that is to stimulate investment across the region and to think of both forests and water jointly. So that was part of the discussions there, the Nevada Forest and Communities group, of which Jay is also a part as well. They're rolling that out. It's going to be presented at their board meeting in March, which will take place in Sacramento, and I think there's going to be a whole lot of, I don't know, hoopla is quite the right word, but more on that and bringing other folks in to try to stimulate that investment and advance thinking on the issue.
And that's why we jumped ahead in our plan and funded this first attempt to look at these forest water balances to make sure we could have some pretty concrete, as much concrete information as we could have about what's going on in this region and how we could improve on that information when we go into this process. Because if you're competing, for example, for storage funds with sites at Temperance Flat, they have a lot of engineering. And it's very concrete. Well, it isn't actually when you dig into it, but they present it as very concrete, the benefits and who gets what. And it's not so concrete with forests. And so we recognize that, and we're starting down that road of trying to get some real concrete infiltration, evaporation data, and environmental benefits, because that's what the storage money's for, environmental benefits. And that's where I think sites and Temperance Flat are going to have their hands full, proving what environmental benefits they're actually producing.
Are the reservoirs?
Yes, the
Those are
new
two
dams, the new dams that are in the proposal. But thanks to Brian Dowley, he got one word in there in the new bond. It said surface or groundwater. And that has opened the literal floodgates on land management and what can it do to store water and what are the environmental benefits of doing such a thing. So it's kind of exciting times to be.
And for those that don't know, Sherry Thrall is on the board of the Sierra Nevada Conservancy, I think Paul Rowan is on.
Paul is also.
Either he's on or he's an alternate. And she's also the chair of the working group, the management group.
That was sort of intentional. We are trying to position ourselves, even though we're starting slow, to catch up.
And they're both pushing for that forest water issue to be something high on the radar screen of the Conservancy. One of the other things that I'm very appreciative of the private forests being represented at this meeting, especially in Plumas County. You own a lot of land here and it's contiguous. And just want you to know how appreciative I am of your participation in this process. Of course, I talked Paul's ear off a couple weeks ago about getting somebody here at this meeting. When it comes to forest in Plumas County, we're not the checkerboard like the Tahoe. We have large tracts of private forest land in the county, as well as the 3 national forests. Actually, a little bit of the 4th is the Toya Bee out in the eastern edge of the county. You know, we have some BLM lands scattered about a little bit, and then there's state lands mixed in there too.
So moving along, my job is to help make this work group accomplish what it wants to do it, and I'm excited to be the coordinator, and I look forward to getting involved with what you think is a priority. And we have these meeting rules, which if we get unruly, I'll remind everybody about, but that probably won't happen at the first meeting. Okay, and then I think I went through, am I going backwards? Okay, here's the Regional Water Management Group, the leadership group. They meet every other month. Their next meeting is actually going to be on March, was it 27th? And that's to accommodate Trina's schedule. She's the tribal representative. She's in school at Chico State. And so that's why that date changed. And our job is to kind of meet in between there. So when they give us tasks to do, we have a chance to wrestle with them and get something back to the management group for their next meeting, so we keep this whole process going. And then here we go into the website. Oops, what do I have to get?
Go up and down lines, or hit it.
Okay, now I hit. Okay, here's the website, and it's featherriver.org, and this is where we're going to be posting a lot of our information. And as you can see, we're going to be posting news. Things like these handouts will end up being in the news slot. We have document drop downs. We have meetings. I'll take you to the work group. And so here's the different work groups. So our information as a work group will be compiled in that category, so that, you know, the studies and the mapping that we're doing and the project development, a lot of it, you'll be able to go right there and find that. And then we're going to be doing this interactive mapping process. Here's the, you know, the topography map, but we're also going to be looking for project areas that are priorities, areas where, as we understand what Burkhardt's finding out with these recharge areas, do we want to do pilot projects in an area where we can really track deep or shallow recharge? How does it compare to site class designations? Just start digging into all that forest water stuff, and hopefully we'll be able to display a lot of this on maps as we get more into this, because people respond better to maps than, this will be a thick planning document, but people will be looking at the maps as probably as much as reading the information that's presented. So we consider this to be an ongoing mapping project. And one of the things that we're going to be looking at is disadvantaged communities, especially in the municipal work group, and making sure that we're serving their needs as we think about what kind of municipal upgrades we have to do. The interesting thing about our area, and why we have another study embedded in this plan, is that 50% of our people are on wells. We're not on big municipal irrigation district systems with rate bases. We have an entirely different system here. And we initially anticipated that this community vulnerability study would be looking at what happens if the water table's too high and if people get pollutants from adjoining land management. Now we're thinking about what happens if the water table's too low. Okay, so either way, we're going to be looking at vulnerable communities.
Just a quick question. Are there many monitoring wells within the county or historical data associated with those?
Jerry Sipet manages a number of public well systems, but, you know, private wells are are private. And so we don't have a lot of that information, but Burkhardt's gonna begin then by this geology, and that whole interaction is so important, is certain wells, just by their structure and where they're located, are gonna be more vulnerable to either pollution or changes in flow or all that sort of thing than other places. And there isn't a handle on that. The system's set up for water districts, not for individual purveyors like us. And
One
so,
of the things we have is what's called CAS-GEM. We're fairly compliant, and that's groundwater level monitoring, and that's through DWR.
yeah, all this new groundwater legislation, we really don't know what it means and how it's gonna roll out.
We do know that with regards to this region, the only identified, it's called Bulletin 118, area to do the first wave of the groundwater management plan is the Sierra Valley. No other area in the county has been identified. There are some drivers in the Plumas County General Plan to do that also, in the water element. And then the other thing I want to talk about is this disadvantaged communities map. And it seems like every state agency has a different map of disadvantaged communities. And we're frustrated by this map. If you'll notice, the Elminor Peninsula is identified as a different disadvantaged community.
We have a long ways to go.
Yesterday, Tom Yegerhofer sent me some information on the latest update of incomes in the county, and we can't even hardly figure out what it says. We briefly looked at it this morning, but we're not real happy with this map. We think we have more disadvantaged communities than perhaps is being identified, and I don't know what.
Jonathan has something to say.
Jonathan, you gonna jump in on that? Help us here, because it's been a frustration to the max.
From our work previously, we know there's a bunch of disadvantaged communities, and this is a classic example of how you cut the data, how you really cut your unit of analysis. And so if you do it in terms of how communities self-identify in this county, you realize really quickly that there are a number of disadvantaged communities as we would normally define them. But then there's another level of, that's a very significant problem, and the Cal EPA commissioned an effort and actually did it internally, where they have identified disadvantaged communities using measures that are not available to Plumas County. And Plumas County communities would never qualify because it's based mostly on air quality issues and a number of other things, meaning that there are no disadvantaged rural communities in all of the rural forested region of California. It's an urban definition, and you say, well, okay, that's what they did. Well, it is not trivial simply because the implications are a lot of the cap and trade dollars, 25% of the cap and trade dollars are required to go to directly or indirectly to disadvantaged communities. So we're talking millions, and it actually is going to get to hundreds of millions of dollars because other agencies are now saying, great, you guys have identified disadvantaged communities. We're going to take this definition in your maps and use them. And so that means that, again, rural, particularly rural forested area California and Plumas County is just going to be left out of those dollars. RCRC is announcing that they're going to take on, they're starting an initiative to take on that definition of disadvantaged communities, and that's what needs to happen at a really broad level because it is so inappropriate for rural areas. And we've been trying to work with the state a little bit doing the same.
Yeah, that's the Regional Council of Rural Counties, and actually Jonathan's going to kind of critique whatever we come up with, so we have a professional on that. Yeah.
Whenever I read some of that data, it seemed like it was based on the average income of the permanent citizens in the area. So on East Shore, we're not disadvantaged because there's only 50 of us that are out time. And it didn't include all the rich folks that own all the property that don't live there permanently. Is that true?
Yes.
It's the 2010 American Community Survey data. They look at median household income and you can either slice it by block group or by what's next to the tracks.
And that probably clumps retirees with working folks, I imagine.
Well, it looked like it only included permanent residents. It didn't include,
it's
like
a mess.
Yeah. But by that criteria, I wouldn't be surprised if the peninsula is disadvantaged using those numbers because the people that are renting or live there year-round aren't the people that own the mansions.
Correct.
So
Well, a lot of real Appalachians don't live behind the closed gates either. They live outside of the actually LACC. So if they included that whole peninsula area, there'd be a lot of folks included in that are ready for work.
Maybe can I talk a little more about the website before you move on?
You bet.
Let me just one point. So I think the effort in this, as far as this project is concerned, not necessarily this work group, is one of what's an appropriate way of defining disadvantaged communities. And then there's an entirely separate effort, which is tackling the EPA definition and their process, which really needs to be seen separate and not falling into the trap of adopting. Because if we adopt that, it makes work easy defining disadvantaged communities. They're not. So separate from and then taking them on at a different level, it goes beyond the scope of this particular effort, but is not really distinct from it because of its implications.
And back to interregional, I mean, where we have to get an interregional voice to make any noise at all. The fact that the Regional Council of Rural Counties is taking that issue on is really exciting. I wasn't aware of that. Also, the Department of Water Resources, we made a lot of racket when they came out with these guidelines saying that it wasn't fair to compare a poor community inside of a rich, well-endowed area compared to a region like us that has no water districts, no rate base, in the whole region, with some exceptions of disadvantage, that they're not the same kind of poverty, and you can't, and they have different kinds of opportunities. So now, Department of Waters recently never contacted us, but thanks to our tribal people, contacted them and said, so tell us more about different measures of disadvantage. So it's a huge opportunity, and again, something that we wouldn't have known about if we didn't have actual tribal participation.
And bringing the tribes in is sort of a master stroke because the EPA process is really biased towards disadvantaged communities or focused on environmental justice issues. So it's in and of itself, it's not necessarily bad, but in terms of how they exclude and the methodology that's used, it is really problematic. So having the tribe as being one of those affected communities is relevant and really important because that gets their ear, that gets their attention.
Okay, Zeke?
Before Zeke goes crazy, I think we ought to just discuss the well issue a little bit more. I think we glossed over some things there, so I'd like to get back to that question.
Okay.
Just for everybody's information, this is being broadcast live. You can access it on the website, and then the meetings are then posted on the website. And you can go back and look at all of them that way. So you're live on the web.
So did you want to ask a quick question before Zeke gets going?
Well, yeah. While there isn't common knowledge of the wells in the county, there is knowledge at the building department and at DWR of all wells. And I'm wondering if there's been any talk with DWR about seeking that information on a meta basis, or that continues to be a failed.
Yeah, we've been trying. It's confidential information at this point, except for the public wells. So one of the reasons we're getting Burkhardt involved is you can take these data points. We're going to focus a lot on Sierra Valley because we have more information on Sierra Valley than any other place, and because it's in this medium risk category and it's going to be under a lot of regulation, under these new groundwater regulation rules that are coming out. And so we are going to try and figure out how you characterize these systems and these well vulnerabilities when you don't have access to a lot of information. And so we went and made special petitions and we cried and we moaned and we went on and on, and they were just like, sorry, that's that. And so we are struggling with data that we can't use.
My understanding historically was the well drillers that didn't want to share that information for competitive reasons, and that's why we have this situation where we can't get to it. And Burkhardt's had me try to get to it in conversations with DWR, and the answer is it's confidential and you can't get it.
Tough. Figure it out. So this is again why
which is a key piece to understanding what's going on with water resources in California.
So this again is why we've embedded these two studies in this plan, because we recognize we have these data gaps, and along with the interregional suggestion, it's all going to be pretty issue and targeted, and where can we make an impact by working together, and how do we get through this no data situation that the rural areas have.
Well, Randy, do you really have that much information on public wells?
Jerry has information, and I think you can get it on public wells as the other ones.
I'm curious if he has that much, because a lot of them were dug before.
He doesn't, I would have to ask Jerry specifically on that.
That's what we'll be doing with this other study. So Zeke,
But before we leave the DAC, Ben, does the water board have anything on DAC that differently than we've discussed already? You guys as frustrated as us, or?
Well, I mean, this has come up in multiple regional discussions, either to the RMG or the work groups, and so, you know, I don't personally know what our working definition of DAC is, but it's certainly something that seems to be different depending on which agency you talk to. You know, I don't have any real. I mean, I could go back to our agency and get that for you.
That would be nice.
You could use it for comparison reasons.
I know that LAFCO is supposed to address it in the MSRs, and we're looking at, Lynn and I had a conversation yesterday about the recent MSRs, which are pretty good, and they're sort of punting it down the road. They don't even know really what to do with it, it appears.
Actually, a lot of LAFCOs use the DWR definition.
You use the DWR. Well, that's frustrating.
okay, just another challenge, but that's not this work group's challenge.
Right, but it's something that we should all be aware of. By the way, one of the other purposes of doing this plan is to get better communication with everybody in the county that's involved in all this. And I think we're starting to achieve some of that. We're all kind of sitting at the same table, hearing a lot of the same stuff together through the various work groups in the regional water management.
Okay, Zeke, go for it. Okay, you want me to sit down?
I know, it's an apple, right?
Apple.
Please don't disconnect the power.
I'm sure there's people, right? I'm sure there's people.
All right. So we've got a few different sections here on the site. We've got a document section, and basically there was a website that was built for the Prop 50 plan that Brian Morris paid for out of his own pocket, because he knew that if the county funded it, it would stop working.
Believe it or not,
when the project was over.
when Brian left, he kept paying for it, and when we started wanting to mess with it, I got a phone call. He goes, after all this time, somebody's doing something. It's sort of like Brian's little private joke. You know, Brian.
That's being polite.
Yeah. So anyway, so we pulled all of the documents from that planning process into this website, which includes all of the meeting. Sorry about that. So there's a lot of meeting notes from the Plumas Watershed Forum and from the previous effort, all the notes and agendas, and a lot of the documents that were put together have been pulled into this site. And then for this project, right now we're collecting documents for the baseline study, and we're right now internally saving them on a different site, but we're in the process of building a document library for this. So part of the DWR grant is that you have to address long-term or longer-term data management of any data that you're generating in your plan. So for that, we are using, we're adapting, we did some work for the Sacramento River Watershed Program. And when I say we, it's my company, GIS. And so the SWIM website is the Sacramento River Watershed Digital Library. We built this with funding from DWR, and it was used to support data management for the PIT and CABI IRWIMs, and it was also used on one of the pilot projects that we did. The reason that they funded SWIM in the first place was because all the work that was done on CalFed and the tens of millions of dollars or hundreds of millions of dollars that were spent on science and research and watershed existing conditions reports. When the CalFed project was ending, all that data was just being lost. It was in people's closets and shoeboxes. All the watershed coordinators that were being laid off didn't have anything to do with the documents. So DWR funded the Sacramento Watershed Program to build this library and to collect as many of the documents as they could find. And so we used the Plumas Corporation as one of the kind of test cases for this. So basically what people can do is they can upload a document to the site. Sorry, it's a little hard to see on this small screen. Basically what SWIM is, it's a metadata library. It's a catalog. And people can upload a document, abstract it, add any information they have on it, add who wrote it, and then also tag it on a map. So we're going to be taking all the documents we're collecting. We're adapting this site now with some of the data management funding for this process to help update this first Sacrum River watershed program. So you'll be able to log into this site through the Upper Feather River page and either contribute the information you have or add or reference the stuff that everyone else is bringing in. So we're going to be working with the work groups to help them figure out how to do that. And in the interim, we're collecting data internally, organizing it, and keeping a spreadsheet that's going to be used to basically create more information that's going to end up in this catalog.
Do you have to have a password to access that file, or does anybody?
Anyone can access this. You'll have to have a password, a login to contribute, but it's a public site, so all you have to do is register and get it.
Okay.
So we have some things in here already from, say, Elmore Basin. If I can figure out how to drive this. Well, since I built it, there's a lot of my stuff on here.
Stuff you need a hand going.
Well, anyway, I encourage you to check it out on a computer that works.
So you're going to link the featherriver.org website to this.
You'll be able to view these maps and view the data and add your documents from within the featherriver.org website. It'll be getting submitted to the SWIM catalog, and it'll show up on their site as well, but there'll be a Feather River catalog. And one of the reasons that when we designed this site, there's the Resources Agency, California Resources Agency has a catalog of environmental documents for the state. It's a collection of other catalogs that have been developed by other nonprofits and the state agencies.
Is that series or?
Series. And that's kind of in a continuous state of being changed and monkeyed with. And, but the idea is that with all these grant funded projects that eventually the website dies, the money's gone, someone moves away. And that if we can catalog information like this into the state catalogs, then it ends up in federal data catalogs. And so this is built using kind of database standards that the state uses to manage spatial data and environmental documents.
Well, we're not just looking at big fancy peer reviewed studies. We're looking at the information that people really use in the system to make decisions as well. What you call gray literature or, standard information, whatever it is when we get into projects. Yeah, that.
Zeke, I remember you presented at a Sacramento Watershed Program meeting in Reading at the Carl Foundation. And I seem to remember at that time you were talking about you'd also upload photographs. In particular, people were talking about like historical photographs, which is that still a possibility?
Yeah, what we did for that is we've used Picasa Web, which is Google's photo galleries. And what you can do with Picasa Web is you can geotag your photos, so you can upload them to a catalog, or you can create a Picasa Web account. And then we can use the feeds from that to display the photos on the map.
Yeah.
It's a map.
One of these handouts talks about
There's a couple of Mac users.
these old photos that were almost thrown away that now are being used to show the change in the forest structure.
Yeah, so for that, for the SWIM process, we added, you can add other people. If you have a user, like, we've got Gmail accounts for this project. This map shows different people who've opened up their collections of photos, their JPEG photos, for inclusion in our catalog. So here's a photo that someone contributed, and it's a photo, so it's a geotag photo taken in last apartment. So if people want to contribute their photos to this, they can. There's instruction on the site of how to set up a Picasa Web gallery and upload your photos.
Is that slide, that snow slide?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Question, do you envisage putting your, the work you did for the Plymouth Farsight Council in there, which has all those GPS sites?
The photo points.
The photo points.
Oh, we could do that. That's the kind of data that lends itself well to that. It's a point photo that's got a tag along with it. Most cell phones now geotag your photo automatically.
The other mother lode is all the work that was done, is attended the Quincy Library Group of official studies and master's theses.
We added photos to this from when we built this originally. We added photos from the monitoring photos from some of the Last Chance and other pond and flood projects. It's driving me crazy here. Next time I'll do a demo on my own computer. But check it out. It's swim.sacredriver.org. We're going to be leveraging it. We're also talking with the mountain counties, or the Sierra Water Working Group. They're also trying to figure out how to do their data management at the same time. So we're talking to them. Is there ways that we can leverage the funding we have for this effort towards use on the Sierra Tahoe and other Sierra Nevada Irwins?
Okay, thanks, Steve.
I got a question.
Yeah.
If you're on this webpage, or any of these web pages, you say you've got 5,000 documents, and you want to look up a specific topic, can you search the webpage, all the documents?
Yeah, so in this SWIM digital library, there's a catalog of all the different pages that have been submitted, and you can say search Feather River.
Okay.
And then that'll bring up, so like the Big Flat project was one of the pond flood projects.
I didn't mean the titles, I meant internally.
Yeah, there's keywords.
Oh, keywords, okay.
So when you create, so here's an entry, it's a digital photo that I shot of the Chips fire, and it's got keywords in there for, wildfire, forest, etc. So when people add their document to this library, then you pick a set of standard tags for the topics.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Any other questions on the website or how it's going to hook into the more regional?
And you can also access it from the main county website under other, and then there's a drop down, I think it says something like water plan or something. It's featherriver.org. It's really easy to remember. Even I've been able to do that.
Okay, moving right along, folks. Let's see where am I? I'm at the website. Okay, so we have a task ahead of us. We have to select a work group chair, and I realize this is kind of a small group because it's our first meeting, but I wonder if anyone would be interested in stepping on to that wonderful position.
Can we make nominations? I nominate Pike.
Who said that?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
What does it entail?
Well, it entails working with me, which I'm sure you'll enjoy immensely. And it also entails showing up at the regional water management group meetings and making about a 5-minute presentation of what we are or are not accomplishing. That's it in a nutshell.
If that's all that I get, I'll do it.
Yay, okay. All right, then we need an alternate.
Who's the alternate?
Well, as a subject sort of person, it's kind of what I do, right? You wouldn't want
Thank you,
Jay,
Mike.
that's why I
Second the nomination.
So we need an alternate as well in case Mike has.
I nominate my buddy John.
Second.
All in favor?
Really, we do. We're not married, but we're very close to marriage.
Well, we'll keep that
All
under
in
control,
favor?
and I look forward to working with both of you. That's wonderful. Thank you.
By the way, the management group has decided to make decisions by majority rules. On the other level, it's more by consensus, but the management group will make decisions on majority rules.
And if
You
we
mean at
can't
this
reach
level, it's more by
consensus,
consensus?
yeah, we're trying to reach consensus. And if we can't, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
Can I comment, Leo, before you get started on this part of it?
Sure.
I don't know if you remember, but I am the chair of the floodplains, meadows, water bodies. And when I attended that meeting, I had a lot of questions. Then I went home and read all the information that was given to me, like the SIP and the MOUs. And I suggest everyone who's going to take a real interest in this work group to do that, because it really enlightened me as to who does what and what we're trying to achieve and everything. So it is like Leah said, if you can't go to sleep at night and you start reading it, why it'll count cheap for you. But I really suggest that you read the SIP and the MOU.
It is really a structured process according to the guidelines from Department of Water Resources. There's things we have to accomplish and there's steps we have to take. So it isn't as free floating except for these studies.
So the stakeholder, the SIP we call it, really has details on meetings and what's to be accomplished. It's pretty enlightening. A lot of work. Luma put a lot of work into this. And it's designed so we can meet the DWR standards. If anybody's interested in a book on consent, there's one by a gentleman named Kenneth Arrow called The Calculus of Consent. And I guarantee 3 or 4 sentences in that book and you'll be asleep.
That's not our purpose, by the way.
We're just going to add some humor, and it's a book about mathematics applied to decision-making process, if you're interested. It was one of my college books when I was in grad school, called The Calculus of Consent by Kenneth Arrow.
Okay.
One you don't forget.
Okay, so we're going to have pizza brought in just before 12, but we'd like to start in for the resource management strategies.
Anybody need a break?
Yeah, if you need a break, we can do a break right now.
Just do a break.
And then we'll dig into our task for today.
Bagel is a good job.